Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are taking a look at what is now Tropical Storm Ian, and you can just tell right away the amount of uncertainty we're going to have with this storm because the trends have shifted radically. I mean, at least since like yesterday. So we're here to break it down once again for you with new updates, maps, and everything. So stay tuned. All right, let's get right into it here, starting off with what's changed in the tracking cone. Now, this is the update from 5 o'clock. They come out about every 3 hours, but the cone is changed only every 6, right? Unless there's some sort of special update, which happens very rarely, if at all. But it is now a tropical storm with sustained winds of 45 miles an hour. It is officially named Ian, and it is definitely gone the bump to the west. And there is definitely an explanation for this, and that'll be shown right in the next map. But for now, you can see that the track is shifted west. Now, this means two things. One, and both these could kind of both mean different things, right? Because on one hand, it's going to pretty much avoid a Cuba landfall. I mean, maybe go over that little tip right there. But when we were showing a landfall yesterday, we were talking about going over the mountains and the actual land here, right? I mean, it's going to barely skim it. So I mean, nothing from Cuba is going to weaken the system. You might think, well, it weakens once it gets up here, and that is because of wind shear. So that's kind of what else changed, right? Because it depends how far south that trough is going to go. That's going to shear it off. If the trough stays more north, that would bring less wind shear to the storm system and obviously help it to grow stronger. All right, so again, there is a more westerly track and has gotten stronger, and it's also shifted away from Florida. Now, like, we could be looking at this thing tomorrow and it could go right back to where it was. So that's why I said, even though this is a trend, that doesn't mean that this is what's set in stone. Also, I think the time kind of has changed because if I remember correctly, we were talking maybe Tuesday or Wednesday in impact. Now Wednesday, Thursday. It is expected to slow down quite a bit because you can see. So here's 2 p.m. Monday. Here's 2 p.m. Tuesday. That's a move in a full 24 hours. Now, this is another 24 hours later, and that's another 24 hours later. So it definitely does slow down, right? Because you can see each black circle that I just did there is in 24-hour increments. And you can see that these final three are much closer to each other. So it will definitely slow down, right? And we do also have some tropical storm watches and even some hurricane warnings there. I think around the Kingston area. I might have the wrong island, but it is south of Cuba. We do have hurricane warnings there. And if we look at the map, Kingston's in Jamaica. Georgetown is the one I meant. That's right. So yes, Georgetown, we do have the hurricane warnings and tropical storm watch just north of that. One reason that could explain this is the bump to the west is the sudden west-southwest track. Because if you look, the storm came in like this and then moved to the north. And yesterday we were looking at it was about here. So we thought, oh, okay, so then it's just going to keep going on this path and then turn, right? But no. It took an unexpected little turn west-southwest, and that signifies that the turn might happen later. All right, now again, Orlando, I mean, even the east coast of Florida, the Space Coast, the First Coast, Orlando, Jacksonville, Tampa, Apalachicola, you guys are all still in the cone. All right, and now even the southeast, like southeast Alabama and Georgia are now also in the cone. And there are definitely solutions where it goes further west than this. Now, I didn't rule out, I did say that Louisiana was very unlikely yesterday. I didn't rule it out, but I did say it was very unlikely. I did pretty much rule out Texas. But Louisiana, you guys actually do have a shot now at seeing some impacts. Even if you're just end up slightly just being west of the storm, there's a lot of uncertainty because technically speaking, the storm could go right here and New Orleans could see light impacts, but the storm could also still go this way and maybe go off the southeast coast. So there's still too much uncertainty, and it has gotten stronger too. So yesterday when we were looking at this, it peaked around here as like a barely Cat 3. Well, it is now a barely Cat 4, or what's going to be forecast to be. All right, so here 2 p.m. on Monday it goes to 110, and then quickly to a strong Cat 3 by 2 a.m. on Tuesday, and then there you go, 130 with gusts to 160. So Cat 5 gust here as we into Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday it drops off. I mean, and according to the National Hurricane Center, quite a lot. I mean, we essentially went from Cat 4 to Cat 2 about 24 hours later. All right, let's take a look at the probability of tropical storm force winds. Now, I wouldn't say this hasn't really changed all that much, although it's definitely shifted to the west. and it's kind of sort of spread out more a little bit as well. So the highest chance of tropical storm force winds is offshore right now, but again, this still could, drastically change. I mean, even Florida points west of Tampa. I mean, Orlando about 4/10 of a chance, even Tampa 50 to 60% chance. All right, so still not ruling it out, even for the east coast of Florida. But New Orleans is even in it now. Like, I mean, that's again, this is more so because of the uncertainty forecast. But still, I mean, it goes inland in Alabama and Georgia as well. So earliest reasonable arrival times for South Florida, like Key West, maybe like early Tuesday morning. Central Florida, maybe late Wednesday evening, late Tuesday evening or Tuesday night. And then North Florida into the southeast by Wednesday in the morning and going throughout the day. Most likely times, however, will be more so later Tuesday for South Florida, like middle of the day Wednesday for Central, and then later Wednesday for North. Now, again, not set in stone. That's just the most likely arrival time of those winds. If we look at the key messages for Tropical Storm Ian, as you can see, it will remain a major hurricane when it moves to the west, and then it's going to kind of turn to the north, right around the northern Caribbean. And as it passes, it's going to pass west of Cuba, and it's going to have a lot of time to strengthen. So again, dangerous storm surge, hurricane force winds, heavy rainfall along Florida's west coast, all right, and the Panhandle. And again, can't rule out any other part of Florida at this point either, because they even say here, I mean, I'm not just making this up to scare anybody. I mean, it says right here, uncertainty in the track forecast is higher than usual, right? So, I mean, it says it right there at the National Hurricane Center. So there is definitely a lot to be seen here, or a lot to watch in the next couple of days. So again, there you go, 40 knots, 45 mile an hour storm right now. Pressure is about 1,003 millibars. Let me actually see on there. Is that what the Hurricane Center also picked up? Yeah, 1,003 millibars moving west, so due west again at 16 miles per hour. All right, let's take a look now at the satellite. So you can see the convection right there, kind of building up around the storm. And again, we're kind of at this point where, I mean, sometimes this time they can get good convection, but the convection forms, the storm kind of rains itself out, and then it kind of starts to dissipate a little bit, and then we'll see new storms fire up. You can see that happening, right? Convection fires up, dies out, another little batch fires up here. All right. So definitely going to be watching this as it progresses. And even, I mean, you can call it outflow. I mean, it's not really like a rapidly developing storm, but it is breathing. I mean, it's breathing well. I mean, this does sort of look like outflow here. So the storm is definitely breathing out quite well. Pretty light shear right now. And I think that is definitely true because it did form from a depression yesterday. We got about 10 miles an hour stronger in the winds today. So definitely saw an improvement there. All right, so let's take a look at the current sea surface temperatures. And I got the pressure enabled actually, so I got that to work so that we can see, where the low is, so we can see the sea surface temperatures for where the storm is at. Look at that, 85 degrees Fahrenheit sea surface temperatures right now. And it kind of looks like it's sitting in sort of a conducive, current. It's kind of sitting like a warm current there. And as now we can't obviously predict, like this won't predict sea surface temperatures in the future. So, I mean, we can kind of follow what you track here at 86 degree waters here. And then once it hits the Gulf Stream, it might do some strengthening. That's pretty much all the time it's going to have after that, because again, once it gets to the northern Gulf, it's probably going to start running into some shear issues. Sea surface temperatures will be fine. I mean, they'll still be around 85, maybe 84, very, very close to land. But the Gulf Stream it will be where the strengthening occurs, kind of like right around here. And also this spot is in the central Gulf, kind of like another current close to the Gulf Stream that's been known to intensify storms as well. We'll see if it even goes that far west. But look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, all right? Definitely above average, and even more so in this darker color. And really, like when you get closer to the coast, but the temperatures themselves are still a little cooler. But it is farther above average there technically, but still above average anywhere you look here in the Caribbean and the Gulf. So definitely looking like conducive in that department. The wind shear right now, not too much. I would say it's kind of light to moderate around the storm, but I think it's got a good blockade going on right now, really not much. And once it gets into here, not much shear. Now again, this is just the current wind shear. This could change. Like that's why we're going to look at how the wind shear could progress, because obviously it won't stay frozen like this forever. But you can see kind of where the trough is sort of at right now, where that shear challenge will be. All right. again, depending on where it goes, maybe, maybe it'll go all the way over here and then hook over here and, have the most maximize its time over water without going into that shear area. But I find that very unlikely. But just another scenario. But definitely, I mean, from Miami to Apalachicola to Jacksonville and back down the Cape Coral, all across the peninsula and even the Panhandle, you guys definitely got to be on the lookout here over the next couple of days. Here is another kind of wind shear map, and you can see where the storm is. Not like this one because it's kind of like a traffic light. Like red is stop bad, and then yellow is like and then green is like good to go. So where the storm is, we got greens right now. Shear according to this is about 5 to 10 knots. And as it moves to the north, again, kind of holding that 5-10 knots all the way up until the south central Gulf of Mexico. Then again, now we get to that yellow and then eventually red. Now it does say 25 and 30. Now that's not horrible. I feel like a major hurricane could put up with that, but it's still going to weaken it. But it can put up with it better than say if there was like barely a tropical storm, then it would just fall apart. It depends how much it's got to kind of sustain itself. Here's where I found the strongest winds. I mean, they found the center here, so it's pretty disorganized. I mean, but there was a lot of convection at the time that hurricane hunters were flying about a couple hours ago, and they did find some pretty low pressures. They found 1,003, in fact. But and that was by another run-in. And you can see here's where the spike happened, right? I mean, we did see a spike in the surface winds to about 40-ish knots, and then that's how they found. And the rain rate spiked with it, so apparently it was in like a area of a lot of convection. Now there wasn't a big drop in pressure. In fact, pressure actually went up. Pressure was still pretty high actually at that same time. So if you look right in between 1858 and 1908 Z, right, there's kind of like a spike in pressure. So that didn't really it doesn't correspond too well. Usually what you would want is, maybe like a spike in wind, and then very shortly before or very shortly after, there'd be a sharp drop indicating that they went through the center, got to the high winds, got to the center, and so on, right? Because the highest winds are not going to be in the center and then hopefully develop storm. Here's the current low pressure center. If you want to know coordinates, it's about 76.25 degrees west and then like 14.25 degrees north. Right, I'm roughly estimating from the naked eye here. If we look at the model track guidance, I'm just refreshing, by the way. I did just set this up like 30 or 40 minutes ago, but I just want to make sure everything is refreshed. Now, compared to yesterday, actually, at least until it gets to Cuba, the models actually are in agreement now. They don't have no wacky models anymore. And honestly, they do seem pretty in agreement, right? Next 2 to even 3 days out, either grazing the western tip of Cuba or missing Cuba altogether in terms of a landfall, and then making its way to the north. Now, here's where it starts to get a little bit more uncertain. Does it go towards Alabama and western Florida? Does it go into here? But again, that's just typical uncertainty. These models actually do look pretty lined up. They do look lined up pretty well. Oh. Now, those other models were in pretty good agreement, but the GEFS is a completely different story. First of all, this black line is all these models averaged out, like basically running it down the middle of all these models. And I'm pretty sure it had a similar, hook into Florida yesterday. And now, I mean, again, that doesn't mean, the main model is kind of sort of averaged out with all these, I guess, but it shifted radically to the west. And again, that's because the models got all wacky. Now it's looking like Louisiana landfall is possible, but more concentrated in there is like an Alabama, Florida panhandle landfall. And that's what the median kind of says, going right up the middle and then hooking in, maybe impacting the mid-Atlantic as, maybe like remnants. Now the GEPS gets even worse. Well, I know it's getting better as we go along, right? Now this I don't see happening unless we see like the trough kind of back off to the north and the high pressure that's to the east here, unless we see that back off or weaken significantly. I don't see this happening. All right, they call it tracking west for another 24 hours and then sharply turning north. Yeah, I don't see that happening. And then kind of hooking to the west. In fact, there's so many of these that are calling for this track to the west that it's kind of impacted the averaged out model, brought it west, and then now they got to take into account these that bring it east. So they go, oh yeah, let's just hook it back east. So the GEPS is like a whole mess. I do not count on this happening at the moment. Now, here is the intensity guidance. Models are in pretty good agreement. A good 90%, kind of bring it into Cat 4 status at some point. 1 almost gets to Cat 5, pretty close, but those 2 are kind of outliers. Expect like a middle of the road Cat 4. So Cat 4 goes from anywhere from like approximately 130 miles an hour to 155. Expect like 130 to 140. But there are models that don't even barely make it a hurricane. Some make it a 2, some a 3. All right. So different models have different solutions for when that peak occurs, but expect at least a category 3 or 4 as of now. If we look at the percentage of models that have it at least a category 3, so 3 or 4, I mean, that's like 95% of the models. So they're in pretty good agreement at the moment. All right. We're heading into the final segment here of the models. All right. Look at the GFS, right? So again, that pretty much misses, I mean, that center's right there. It pretty much misses Cuba altogether. And it's going to kind of hook its way to the north. Now, look what happens, right? Things are going good, moves over the Gulf Stream. Wow, it looks ever so powerful right now, right? 3, 2, 1, boom. I mean, it just loses so much. Now, I don't think it could happen. I mean, it could happen this quickly, but just look how tightly those isobars are packed together. And then 6 hours later, it just completely falls apart. I actually do want to look at the sustained wind graph for that and just see how much it dropped off, because that's a pretty good drop. Now, it's still a hurricane, but it does weaken pretty quickly. Now, that would be a relief, but you're still going to get the storm surge and everything else with it. So let's actually look at the winds here. Let's actually go back. There we go. So it happened at 126, and then it kind of drops off here. So it went from 83 knots. So if I'm estimating, that's about a category, borderline between 1 and 2. I think that's a category 2. And then boom, down to 70 knots. And that's most certainly a Cat 1, because the bottom threshold for a Cat 1 is 64 knots. So it goes from a Cat 2 to a low-end Cat 1 pretty quickly. And by landfall, it's practically a tropical storm. So again, this would be good, but I mean, we're still going to see the rain impacts, of course, and still some light surge if this were to happen. I don't think it's going to weaken this quickly unless the trough dips south that much that the wind shear just becomes that strong. Again, this is why we're going to be monitoring the system, because things changed just radically from 24 hours ago when I did this video, the same kind of video, and it could change 24 hours more. Now, the Euro still has that track over Western Cuba, similar to what we saw in some of the models yesterday. And I might think, good, it's going to be weaker. Not really, because it still intensifies. Like I said, if it goes around those mountains that are sort of right here, it can still make a landfall without going over mountains, if it were to go over here as well. Euro's kind of holding true to their initial conjecture here, or initial guess. All right, and it just has a storm arriving late morning, early afternoon Wednesday into Wednesday night, then all through Thursday and most of Friday. I mean, maybe by the afternoon it'll start pulling away, but a good couple of days it's going to sit there around Florida, skim the western coast, and then its remnants kind of move into the Tennessee Valley and the Mid-Atlantic. All right, let's look at the Canadian model now, which shows similar to GFS, barely skimming western Cuba, and that allows it to be further west later on. Here's your high pressure that's sitting right here, all right, and it kind of goes to about here. So that kind of, and then we got the trough that kind of sort of digs down like this. I mean, it could force it down this path, but the trough kind of seems blocked right here, so it kind of blocks that entry, or that exit route, for the storm. So again, a lot of things to watch here. And for some reason, the GFS, their rainfall total is just not updating. Like, their 18Z run is pretty much completely out, and the rainfall map is not. So we'll take a look at that on another map, but for the GFS. But for now, let's just look at the 12Z. I know it's gonna be a little bit, it's weird because it's not the same model run. I don't know why it's not loading. That's just very weird. But 12Z GFS keeps the heaviest rain offshore, thank goodness, but still a little rain there for, like Jacksonville, and still a few inches of rain for Florida Peninsula, and quite a few still for Alabama. All right. European model, again, still kind of showing that rightward hook. So Tampa, you're getting in on the double digits. Jacksonville over half a foot. Orlando, the Space Coast, the First Coast, kind of closing in on a half a foot of rain, if not approaching it. And the Canadian, in my opinion, is actually a blend between GFS and Euro, because GFS kind of over here, Euro's kind of over here, and the Canadian models kind of in the middle because the heaviest rain is still offshore with the GFS, right? But it still brings some heavy rain to the coast like the European had. So kind of like a blend in between the two there. So thank you guys for watching today's video. Again, I will be keeping you guys updated. Definitely stay tuned. Thank you for watching. A lot to watch with this storm. I mean, this is, again, not exciting for Florida, but it's exciting for someone who's watching it. Again, we do hope for the best, and we do wish everybody well that's in the path of this storm system. But there's a lot to be watched with Ian. This is like the first storm that's really like a big storm that's threatening the United States. So it's one that we have to watch closely and keep an eye on very carefully. So thank you guys for watching. I am the Weather Dude signing off. Till next time.